If this Parliament gets it wrong, everyday Australians will suffer through inflation or worse, stagflation for decades. And instead of working together to push Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum plan based on United Nations policies, work together instead for our country. Klaus Schwab's life by subscription, quote, is really serfdom. It's slavery. Billionaire globalist corporations will own everything: homes, factories, farms, cars, furniture. And everyday citizens will rent what they need, if their social credit score allows. The plan of the Great Reset is that you will die with nothing. To pull off this evil plan, Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum will need to take more than just material possessions from Australians. Senators in this very chamber today who support the Great Reset threaten our privacy, freedom and dignity. Yes, they're in this Senate chamber. One nation vehemently opposes the Great Reset, the Digital Identity Bill, theft of agricultural land use, forcing farmers off their land, and all of the Great Reset. One nation has a comprehensive plan to bring our beautiful country back to sustainable prosperity. And in the months ahead, we will be rolling that plan out. Instead of lib-lab pushing Klaus Schwab's Great Reset with the tagline, "You will own nothing and be happy," One Nation advocates the Great Resist.
News, folks, Britain is now in the grip of arguably the worst financial crisis since the Second World War. But how did it happen? The war debt that we accumulated was because German bombs rained over London and other great British cities. Hitler, history's worst monster, was rampaging across Europe, with his territorial ambitions being the United Kingdom next. Fascism threatened our very existence and that of the free world. A pretty solid justification for expanding the national debt, I'm sure you'll agree. So what happened this time round? A few bad flu seasons with a coronavirus not dissimilar to previous respiratory illnesses, the average death toll from which was over 80, which is actually above the age of life expectancy in this country. A nasty virus for sure, and a tragedy for those who we lost. But a bug non-fatal to almost everyone, and yet we shut down the economy for 2 years. We closed schools, we covered people's faces and borrowed £500 billion. £500 billion. Let that sink in. Here's what it looks like written down. Just look at that number. I've never seen a number like that before. You'll just never get your head around what a colossal figure that is. And wouldn't that money come in handy right now to help people with their energy bills? And to give you a flavour of the sheer madness of it all, and all of it was mad, including paying healthy people to stay at home and closing thousands of once viable businesses, we had the test and trace system, which the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, was begging for months. It cost £34 billion and it didn't work, because when cases reach a certain level, you can no longer track or contain and isolate a disease like this. No sugar Sherlock. Our disastrously arrogant, under-evaluated, ill-conceived, non-evidence-based attempt to stop a respiratory virus, something never previously attempted in human history, could be forgiven if they had done it for a few weeks. But they did it for 2.5 years. And here we are. Yes, countries around the world also had lockdowns, which has created supply chain issues and therefore inflation. And old Vladimir has not helped with his invasion of Ukraine, which has spiked the cost of grains, cooking oils and energy. But the real smoking gun can be found in Whitehall and the crime of printing hundreds of billions of pounds worth of empty money. I know the world's gone mad and men are women and women are men these days, but even economists have become separated from reality. Thick as pig shit professors and economic so-called experts told me on this programme and on my radio show prior to that this borrowing was cost neutral. They said interest rates were so low it almost paid us to borrow money. The experts, they said the real challenge was to get on top of this virus, and now they're eating their words. Although, be clear, there will be no words of contrition or apology from them. They are unashamed. And now we're faced with so many problems. Unemployment, which has been mercifully low, is now set to jump by over 1 million. That's right, 1 million wrecked lives. Two-digit inflation may be with us for another 12 months. And we're predicted to be in a recession not for a few weeks or a few months, but a year and a quarter. The illiberal and frankly communist-style experiment of lockdowns has created the first man-made recession in history, probably in response to a man-made virus. Who knows? A year ago, that sentence would have got you cancelled. Now people seem to silently nod in agreement. 100 brave Tory MPs were the only voices of dissent in the course of this pandemic. Heroes like Steve Baker and Mark Harper, who risked their careers to say this is madness. They should be the ones in competition for the keys to number 10, not Sunak or Truss. Those two sat idly by and nodded this madness through, led by the allegedly freedom-loving Boris Johnson, as they all sat smugly around the cabinet table. That's when they weren't having parties. The British people have had a crime visited upon them and are now waking up to the consequences. We've been attacked, we've been imprisoned, and we've been burgled by a state that has forgotten it's there to serve us. And British children that haven't even been born yet will be landed with the bill. And we could do with some of that $500 billion right now to tackle the cost of living crisis, which is, of course, the cost of lockdown crisis. Let's take another look at how much we borrowed. That's a lot of numbers on there, isn't it? That's a figure so big it will get Carol Vorderman excited. Well, we're now on a countdown to catastrophe. I know it's the other girl now, but it works better with Vorderman. You'll find my record of opposition to this goes back all the way to March 2020. It's all there on Twitter. Take a look. But it's about where we go from here as we face what will be a hellish economic storm that really matters. We must pray for a negotiated peace between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. We must tackle the monster of inflation, the stealth tax that hurts us all. We must chop down the magic money tree and get back to living within our means and paying down our debt and stimulating economic output. The ultimate goal must be a low-tax, productive economy that seizes the freedom that Brexit has to offer. We need a lean, mean economy where you can make something of your life and where it pays to work. And we must learn from the seismic mistake of COVID measures, all of which, masks, plastic screens, bubbles, lockdowns, distancing, will be laughed at by future generations. What the hell were they thinking? Is what they'll cry. Of course, you'll hear about new variants and new viruses, with Big Pharma offering the answer. I couldn't care less if next time round it's the bubonic bloody plague. You give the public the information they need and let them act accordingly. You don't close schools, shut down businesses, mandate medication, borrow billions, or stop people from seeing, caring for, or even burying their loved ones. There will be siren calls for more COVID measures in the winter months as cases increase. I can't think many people will take those seriously now. I personally will not wear one of those filthy, worthless masks ever again. As the commentator James Melville points out this week, there are now 3 billion of those masks in the sea. Absolutely shocking. Look at the state of that. And we actually got through 129 billion, all of which were thrown away. 3 billion, that's a big number. Come on, Greg, let's have a look at how it appears on the screen. 3 billion masks. Non-biodegradable, killing wildlife, entering fish, and therefore, ultimately, the food chain. We used to wear the masks. Next, we'll be eating them. Nice. And how much did we borrow again, Greg? Let's have a look at this. $500 billion. I've never seen a number that big. I might get a tattoo of that on my forearm. The suggestion of more economically damaging COVID restrictions will be a sick joke to those shivering in their homes this autumn and winter, wearing 2 coats because they can't afford to switch the heater on, deciding just how many times they can afford to put the kettle on that day. In March 2020, a generation of politicians, so-called scientific experts, woke virtue signalling medics, and bullying broadcasters and journalists took us by the hand and led us into hell. Amazingly, they're still on telly and still on the radio, complaining about a crisis they created. They shouldn't be on the telly or on the radio. They should be in hiding. Never forgive and never forget. As we brace ourselves for a year of economic hell which will impact our health, our lives, our livelihoods and our future, it's the biggest I told you so in history. Never again.
My last slide, because my 12 minutes is just up, have reacted to the truth coming out. They admit that they've been telling porkies, and now they propose to increase their power. So central bankers belatedly admit, oh, now that you've mentioned it, yes, banks create the money supply. So let's abolish that now. And also, by the way, let's abolish cash. So what should we do? Well, introduce digital cyber currency that central banks issue and control, and thereby gain total control over all economic transactions, decisions, and the whole lot you've just heard from the CEO of the GDI. So the greatest concentration of central banking power in history is really the bid they're aiming at. That's the central bank's goal. And, of course, digital accounts of dissenters and regime critics could be switched off. It'd be very difficult to even purchase necessities. So this is an Orwellian dystopia of total control, the end of any freedoms. That's really what central banks are aiming at. Several central banks have, like the Bank of England, already prepared their microchip implant, RFID chip, to be implanted under your skin. And why is the sudden discussion about universal basic income from all the grassroots and inverted commas movements and billionaires? Oh, universal basic income is the bribe for you to accept the microchip. The overarching trend of the 20th century is concentration of power in the hands of the few. That's what we have to keep in mind. We have to work against this. We don't want to have these unaccountable central planners making decisions. We need decentralization, and the solution therefore is to maintain public money in the hands of local community banks, decentralize decision-making, give local people the power in the form of local public banks and local not-for-profit community banks. As I walked in, I was delighted to see that the Gottlieb Duttweiler Institute is also about Genossenschaften, cooperatives, and of course, the majority of banks in Germany are cooperative banks, and that's really what we need. So,
angry world, how to prepare, take the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset. So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
There is only one way this pandemic is going to go. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
Would anyone still be afraid if not for the incessant propaganda of the corporate media cabal and our bureaucratic class? The greatest emergency I see is a lack of strength. And of course, the pattern continues with the lamentable World Health Organization declaring monkeypox as a global health emergency, while the White House is now pivoting to the monkeypox emergency without even batting an eyelid. And coming up next is the so-called climate crisis. South Australia's Parliament recently declared a climate emergency with no real evidence, and their proposed solution is transforming the economy to net zero emissions. Quite a goal. But how exactly it will be achieved? Well, here's the spoiler alert. It'll involve more government control over your life, restricting your ability to run businesses how you want, restricting your ability to buy what you want, go where you want, along with soaring food, fuel and electricity prices. People do strange and terrible things when they're afraid. They behave emotionally and look for people to blame. Those who want rational debate and value freedom over the promise of safety are now labelled as threats to the public. We saw this with people who refused COVID mRNA injections. They were called anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists, just for wanting transparency and not wanting to be locked in their homes. I'm sure we'll see that with climate lockdowns too. Australians need to be aware that whether through apathy or by design, we are allowing our liberty to be sacrificed at the altar of safety. The weapon is fear. The remedy is the emergency declaration. As Edmund Burke said, no passion so effectively robs the mind of its powers of acting and reasoning as does fear. Aspiring tyrants know this well and will continue to exploit it. The game plan is to hold us in a perpetual state of emergency until absolute power is obtained. Don't sit by the sidelines and watch our freedom fade away.
So a tremendous opportunity that needs to be invested in and drawn on, not just create good green jobs of the future, but good green careers of the future. And that's what we're focused on in Canada, and that's what you're focused on here. As we launch a partnership to continue and deepen the work that we've been doing between Canada and California on climate and nature, we're building a team of almost 80 million people. This new partnership will see us work together on everything from protecting nature, driving investment in clean tech, keeping single-use plastic out of our oceans. We're also committed that Canada and California will bring together experts at UN Climate Week to drive progress on wildfires and climate and forest resilience. The bottom line is we're delivering what matters to people: clean air and water, good jobs, and a strong future that leaves no one behind.
I have deep confidence, for no other reason, and the Prime Minister and I were having this conversation a moment ago, people get it. All you have to do is open your own eyes. You may not believe in science, but you'll believe your own eyes. There's no Republican or Democratic thermometer. I mean, there's certain facts and realities that, even with all due respect, the primetime lineup at Fox News can't manipulate. Here in a state, I'm privileged of being a governor and walking into former Governor Ronald Reagan's office every day. To be reminded that in California, it was a Republican governor by the name of Ronald Reagan that led our efforts in our low-carbon green growth by establishing the California Air Resources Board. So we had the ability to establish the relationship formally with Quebec and our cap-and-trade program that we shared together, which is remarkable, and the formal relationship we were able to establish and advance with British Columbia. It's the reason we are part of a coalition, the MO2 coalition, or
Hey everyone, bonjour tout le monde. I'm in California today with Governor Newsom. We're signing an agreement to make sure we continue the deep partnership we've had on fighting climate change, on protecting our environment, in creating good green jobs and moving forward in ways that really matter to people. C'est un grand plaisir de pouvoir travailler si proche avec la Californie sur les enjeux qui sont importants pour les Canadiens. Governor Newsom, talk about this partnership.
Well, désolé, je ne parle français. But you don't have to speak the same language to understand that we're all in this together. Divorce is not an option, and so we're here on the issue that extends, I think, a global consciousness, and that's the issue of climate change. And you're in a state where we're experiencing the extremes, and so we're on the leading and cutting edge of not only dealing with the realities of it, but also the opportunities. And that's why it's so wonderful to have you down here, Prime Minister, to focus on those partnerships and the opportunity of advance together.
We only build a better world if we're doing it together, and gathering like-minded partners like California and Governor Newsom is the way that we make this better future a reality for everyone. Je suis très content de tout le travail qu'on est en train de faire. On va continuer de le faire. Ensemble, on avance. Merci.
Senator Cotton recently wrote a letter to BlackRock raising questions about the company's ESG activities, and we want to thank him for joining us. And that's where I want to go with this conversation, Senator, because you have been outspoken and recently, as we said, just wrote this letter to BlackRock, effectively saying that their policies and their power and influence over companies around ESG are too much. What's the argument you're making, and then we can maybe dig into it?
Well, Andrew, what Larry Fink and BlackRock have done, in part through collusion with this climate action partnership, is essentially create a climate cartel. They are trying to suppress investment in the fossil fuel industry in America. And I know you have a lot of CEOs and investors who watch. I would just say this: if you're thinking about joining this climate cartel, you better think again and you better lawyer up. There's a reason why America's top law firms are already advising their clients to be wary here, because this is contributing to $5 a gallon gas. And when Republicans take charge in November, I'm going to make sure that the Congress is investigating these matters. This is almost certainly a breach of these firms' fiduciary duties, probably a civil violation of the antitrust laws, exposing them to triple damages, and very possibly a criminal violation.
Why is it better to be here in Davos than in Washington, D.C.? Well, we're here meeting with world leaders, the biggest, most important people in the world, and we're bringing back tremendous business in the United States, and they're all here to see. I'll be making a speech, and then we'll be leaving shortly. But I think it's very important. The other's just a hoax. It's the witch hunt that's been going on for years. and it's disgraceful. But we look forward to being here. Klaus has done a fantastic job. And again, we're meeting with the biggest companies in the world, the biggest businesses in the world, and world leaders, all for the benefit of the United States. We look forward to the meetings.
Why not have witnesses this rights on climate change, Mr. President?
Well, I'm a big believer in the environment. The environment to me is very important. Thank you.
I thank you for your engagement, and it is now my great pleasure to invite the Honorable Gavin Newsom, the Governor of California, on stage to provide us with his remarks. And Governor, I think it's very significant that you open this meeting, because we know the pioneering role California is playing and you personally have played. And we are honored to have you here as a friend of the World Economic Forum since many, many years. Governor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Klaus, and thank you all for being out here, and certainly look forward to what comes out of this two-day summit.
Es sind alles wirklich so, und zwar geht es darum, dass man eine Aufarbeitung macht über Corona-Test. Und so wie es aussieht, leben da nicht etwa allein mit den Rüsten. So, die Bühne hinten dran stehen überall da gesucht, Wandern. Es sind alles Leute, die gesucht. Und zwar geht es darum, dass man eine Aufarbeitung.
Your free will. Oh, you can't drive a car. And again, trying to apply the ideas out of Europe onto the United States. Europe has a lot of mass transit. It's a very small continent. And North America, not so much. So stick that idea where the sun doesn't shine.
Well, I have gone to Davos for 20 years for the World Economic Forum, and it's always been an incredible opportunity to hobnob with the leaders of the world. It is incredibly well attended every year. So for some reason, everybody's getting together globally. It has been the place that all of these people meet every year. You're right. Leo, your thoughts on the ideas of going green and taking away your private vehicle?
Well, obviously, when we think about the history of motor vehicles, cars, and other transportation, it has lifted millions, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty and has changed the dynamic of how we all live and the quality of our lives. So yes, while we all want a clean economy and we want a climate that is sustainable, the reality is that a collapsing economy isn't the answer. So there has to be a balance, and unfortunately, in today's bifurcated world, we get a little bit too much extremism. So hopefully we can bring some sense back into it.
Let's figure this out. But I don't understand why it's not being dealt with sense of urgency. Right. To me, it's like what they're saying is, oh, this really isn't real. It's like I maybe we are over-reporting it, but then publish something that tells me that that's the case. And I don't think that's what they're finding. I think it is
well, because they're afraid of getting shut down by something.
I don't know what they're afraid. They seem to be afraid of the truth always.
I mean, obviously, health is not a one-size-fits-all. So
what? Here's
what I think. I think the reality is this. They know darn well it's the vaccines. And their ramifications, the repercussions of that are so profound. To come out and say now, whoops, after people have lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, got kicked out of the military, weren't able to finish their educations, were forced, mandated in many cases to get these injections, to come back now and say, turns out we actually hadn't tested them. We never tested them on pregnant women or women of childbearing age. We never tested them on people with autoimmune diseases. We never tested them on people who are on X, Y, and Z class of drugs. We just gave them, again, broad brush, told everybody to get one, not only get one, get two, get three, whatever it is. I think the fallout, Drew, would be so profound that I'm just not